Today we're wrapping up the series, Two Sons, and of course it's been an interesting journey for me as a parent of two sons to experience this particular story. We've been looking at the parable of the prodigal son, the most famous parable Jesus teaching. A parable is an earthly story with a spiritual meaning, and so it's been an interesting journey. But that's all about to change for me and my family. We are about to give James up for adoption. No, just kidding. Just kidding. No, we are expecting again. We are expecting another child in our home. And, I just we were very shocked about this. And so if you could just tell me how to stop this from happening, let me know. And, so we're very surprised. 10 weeks in a day, and just appreciate your prayers. I might need a break, sabbatical, like next year, maybe. But no. Or I need to work till I'm 75 years old. One or the other. But we're wrapping up our series today, and it's interesting. My son James is 11 months old, 10 months, not even 11 months old yet, and we're starting to see that he's developing a will of his own. We kind of always knew there was, from very early, we were aware of competing resources in our home divided between our son Matthew's 3 and James 10 months, and Matthew has been aware of it from day one. Now James is starting to become aware of it, because usually James would be playing with something and Matthew would see him, and maybe Matthew wasn't be playing with that toy, whatever it was, and he just wouldn't want James to have it, just take it away from him. Just look at, I don't really care anything about that right now, but I don't want you to have it. So we take it away from him, and James was at the place where he's okay. He's like, fine, I don't have this anymore, so he finds something else to play with. So Matthew takes that away. So that's starting to change, where James gets upset if that's taking away from him. And Matthew pushes on him, and James getting to the place where he can push back. So it's really about to change a lot. And really, if you grew up with siblings, a sibling who's close in age, you experienced that. Or siblings are those who are the first competitors for limited resources. And hopefully, they're not just our first competitors, but as we grow older, they become our closest friends. That's certainly for our hope for our two sons. But it's interesting that in a story of two sons, this famous parable that Jesus tells, we see interaction between the father and the younger son. And we see interaction between the father and the older son. But we don't see any interaction between the brothers. We don't know what their relationship is like. We know that the elder brother is resentful of his younger brother. And it's easy to imagine why. When the younger son asks his father in Luke 15, verse 12, the younger son says to his father, "Give me my share of the estate. I want my inheritance, and I want it now, not just when you die. I'm entitled to it. I want it." And so his father gives it to him. Now, in this day and time, the elder brother had a double portion of the inheritance. So that meant that the younger son would have 1/3, and be entitled to 1/3 of the inheritance. And so this is taking 1/3 of his father's wealth, and he takes it. And of course, how does he use it? He promptly wastes it. We're told that not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. He didn't just throw it away, make a bad investment. No, he just in just ungodly, reckless living, throws away all that he has. And of course, he gets to a place where he's in need. There's a famine that strikes the country. He has to hire himself out to a man who owns pigs so that he can feed the pigs to make a living. But it turns out what he's getting paid to feed the pigs is less than what the pigs are eating. And so he's starving to death. He decides to come home, and he comes home, and his father runs to greet him. He doesn't even have time to get out of his mouth his speech, his request to be just received as a servant into his father's household, because after all, what does he have to live on? He has nothing. Everything that was his, he has wasted, he has squandered, he has thrown away. And so he says, just make me like one of your hired hands. Make me like one of your servants in your house. But the father interrupts. He won't even hear this speech. He interrupts his son's speech, and he speaks to his servants, and he says, listen, get a robe, get a ring, put it on his finger, sandals on his feet, bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. So in everything that the father does, he is indicating that this son has been fully restored. He does it. He calls him this son of mine. And not only that, but the robe, the ring, the sandals, everything indicates you're not a servant. You are a son. You are restored. Which means what? What is he now entitled to as a son? He's entitled to an inheritance again. Fully restored, 1/3 of the estate. Except the only problem is that what's left, everything that's left belongs to whom? It belongs to the elder brother, or at least it's his inheritance. So they decide to have a party. They decide to have a feast. Guess whose inheritance they're feasting on? It's the elder brothers. And so now, are you mad now? Okay, this is our 4th week of this series, and so maybe you were trying to process and move past some of that bitterness of the elder brother, and now it's just fresh and you're all mad again. And for good reason. For good reason. Look at the elder brother's gripe. This is his concern. When he won't go in and participate in the party, the father comes out and pleads with him. And the elder brother responds. He says, listen, this son of yours has squandered your property with prostitutes. He comes home and you kill the fattened calf for him. You're restoring him, this younger brother. Basically, his gripe, his complaint, his beef is, it's not fair. This is not fair. And he's absolutely right. Now, Jesus tells this parable, he tells this story in the context of some complaints or some criticisms that he's been receiving about his approach, his tactic, his style of ministry as a teaching rabbi. What he's doing, what Jesus is doing, and this is not just in this particular case, but occasionally, frequently, he was being criticized for the kind of people that he was spending time with. For those that, for example, he was sitting down and sharing meals with, which was a big deal for a Jewish person because they had certain dietary laws they had to abide by, they had to keep. And so if you really didn't live the Jewish lifestyle or live by the teachings of God and the Scriptures, that you really, you usually didn't share table fellowship with those people. But here was Jesus breaking bread with people who were far from God, people who were living an ungodly lifestyle, people who were considered to be unclean. And so those who are criticizing Jesus, we see this in the beginning of this chapter in Luke chapter 15, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And so they interpreted Jesus' actions as indicating that he was, in a sense, giving a blessing upon their lifestyle, upon what they were doing. In fact, Jesus, far from doing that, Jesus wasn't doing that at all. Instead, this was his approach to ministry. And in response to this criticism, we're told in verse 3 that Jesus tells them a parable, which Jesus did often. He often told parables, which is so cool because a story, a parable draws us in, just like we've been drawn into this story over these last 3 or 4 weeks. We've been drawn into it today. And he tells actually a story, but he doesn't just tell one parable. He tells 3 parables, okay? And the first parable, the first story, is a story of a lost sheep. And he says, which of you, if you had 100 sheep and one of them wanders off, are you going to just say, well, I got 99, I'm happy with 99, or are you going to leave the 99 and go look for that lost sheep? I mean, after all, a sheep is the means of living for a shepherd. No, you're going to leave the 99 and you're going to try to find that lost sheep. And then he tells a parable of a lost coin. He said there was a woman who owned 10 silver coins, a drachma. And there seems to be the context is implied here that this is not a wealthy woman. This is what we would consider today to be in poverty. This silver coin would be worth about a day's wages in Jesus' day. And so imagine that this woman had 10 silver coins. That was her entire life savings, and she lost one of them. You think she would say, well, I got 9. I'm happy with 90%. I mean, that's doing pretty good. Or is she going to search every nook and cranny of that house to try to find that lost coin? No, she's going to look for the lost coin, and then when she finds it, she's going to call up her friends and say, I'm so glad I had lost the coin. Now I have found it. Just like the shepherd who finds his lost sheep is going to rejoice over that lost sheep. And then Jesus tells the third parable. The third story, which is the story we've been focusing on the last 4 Sundays. the lost son, or the prodigal son, if you will. And it is a story of one of the sons who is lost. Now, 3 stories, 3 parables. But if you noticed that there's something different about the last one. There's something different from the parable of the lost son as compared to the lost sheep and the lost coin. And not just because it's about people and not animals or things. There's a difference. Does anybody notice what the difference is? Huh? Somebody heard whispers. I don't know. In this parable, nobody goes to look for the lost son. He's lost. No one goes, in both the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin, someone goes to look for them, but in the parable of the lost son, it doesn't happen. Now, if a sheep is worth looking for and a coin is worth looking for, how much more would a lost son be worth looking for? So if there was a character in this story who would go to look for the lost son, who would it be? It wouldn't be the father. I mean, he's an aged man. To make a trek to a distant country, we're just told a far country, the hazards of travel in that day, he couldn't make the trip. And it would be too important of a journey to entrust to a servant, to ask a servant to go retrieve your son. In fact, that would be almost undignified. It's too important of a task. No. Who would it be? Who would it be that would go to his responsibility to go look for his brother? It would be the elder son. If anyone would go look for the younger brother, the younger son, it would be the elder son. So let's imagine this scenario, okay? We have an elder son. And if far from seeing his younger brother as a competitor, maybe he did when they were growing up and now they had those struggles. But here's an elder son who shares his father's heart and who loves his younger brother, who desires his well-being, what's best for him. And so when his younger brother comes to his father and says, "Give me my share of the estate," he grieves. Not just because of the slap in the face to his aged father and basically saying, "You're not going to die quick enough, old man. I want my stuff now." Not only does he grieve because of what is happening to his father, but he grieves for his brother. That his brother is doing this to himself because he knows his character. He knows he's not responsible. He's not ready to inherit this. And he most likely knows how he's going to use it. And so he grieves for his younger brother. And his younger brother goes off to this far country, and who knows how he's living or what he's doing. He sees the toll that this is taking on his father. That his father is worried day and night, sleepless nights, worried about his younger son. You know, they say that you're never doing as well as your worst kid. I mean, if they're sick or, doing something. That he's worried sick about his youngest son. So the elder son decides to do something about it. He decides he's going to relieve his father's angst, and out of desire for concern for his brother, he's going to go find him. He's going to set out for this distant country. He doesn't know exactly where he's gone, but so he's going to have to travel the usual trade routes, maybe inquire. It's going to be a treacherous journey. He's going to have to make preparations for the trip. It's going to take time. It's going to be risky. But he's going to make that trip to find his elder brother or find his younger brother and to bring him back home. Why would he do it? He would do it because he loves his father. He wants to please his father. He shares the heart of his father. And he loves his brother. He desires what's best for his. He doesn't see his brother as a threat to his well-being. He desires his brother's well-being as much as he desires his own. And so, Let's imagine the scene. There's the younger brother, living in a pig pen, literally. Feeding slop to hogs every day and finding the slop looks appetizing because you're starving. The famine has struck, you have nothing. Every day you beat yourself up over what you did. How could I leave when I had it so good? How could I have done that? I'm sure after what I've done, those people back home, they don't care anything about me. They probably wish I was dead and gone. They don't even think about me anymore. I'm out here totally alone. In fact, there's probably days in that younger brother's life where he wonders if this kind of life is even worth living anymore. Why do I keep on living? And then one day, he looks up. He looks up from the slop. And there in the distance, maybe your vision standing above him, there's maybe even blocking the sun, there is a silhouette of figure. And it's his brother, his elder brother. And he's there and he says to his younger brother, "Our Father has sent me. And He has sent me to find you and to rescue you and to bring you home because your Father loves you and I love you. In fact, in my Father's house, there's a room waiting just for you. I've come to get you myself and to take you so that you and me and our Father and our family will be reunited. Take my hand. Come with me." And he lifts his brother out of the pigsty and he brings him home. It's a beautiful story, isn't it? That's the gospel. That is the gospel. In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 10, the author of Hebrews tells us this. It says, "In bringing many sons and daughters to glory." We could also substitute the word home there. In bringing many sons and daughters home, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation. A pioneer is someone who does what? Who makes a journey. Who travels to some far-off place. In fact, they're the first one to get there. You imagine the prairies of America, those pioneer wagons going across. The pioneer of salvation, the one who trekked out there alone. He journeyed to that far country to rescue us, to save us. Pioneer of salvation. Perfect through what he suffered. And when he talks about he's being made perfect through what he suffered, he's referencing back to verse 9, the verse before this one. He's describing who that pioneer is. Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels. In other words, he took up human flesh. The Bible in one place describes that human beings are made a little lower than the angels. That's in one of the Psalms. And for a little while, he was made a little lower than the angels for a little while, for like 33 years. But now he is crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. In other words, he bridged the gap. He made the journey to the far country to rescue us and to bring us home. Verse 11. Both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy, both the Father and the Son and all the younger brothers, we are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. He says he is our brother. He is our true elder brother. The first, the one who was only begotten Son, firstborn from all creation. It says in Colossians. Verse 12. He says, "I will declare your name." I will declare your name to my brothers and sisters. In the assembly I will sing your praise. He's actually quoting from the Old Testament there. I'm going to speak of my Father's love to my lost brothers and sisters. So, what do we see? We see in this story implicitly, not explicitly stated. And we see in the life and the ministry of Jesus, we see that Jesus is the elder brother we need. He's the elder brother that we need, that we needed and was provided. And there's another side of this. He's also the brother that we should have been. Jesus is the elder brother that we need, and He is the brother that we should have been. Now imagine the context where Jesus is telling this. Okay, He's telling the story, and He's telling it to the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the guardians of Old Testament tradition, the religious leaders of Israel. And it's clear that in the parable, that in the story, that the younger brother represents the tax collectors and the sinners. Those people who were far from God. Those people who Jesus was criticized for spending time with. And it's also equally clear that the elder brother represents the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who are resentful for the attention that's being given. In fact, even the party that's being had for these who are coming back home. But in the midst of Jesus telling this story, while Jesus is the one reaching out to these who are lost, that it's implicit that what He is saying to the religious leaders of Israel, He says, why don't you take up this responsibility? Why don't you take up responsibility? They're your younger brothers. After all, you are responsible for the leaders, the people of Israel. That you would care about them, that you would reach out for them instead of just writing them off as unclean. We want nothing to do with them. We could also say there's no fair. We love to blame things on Pharisees and teachers of the law. Okay, they're not around anymore. This is spoken to us. Those of us who identify as believers, Christians, religious people. That we would model this heart of our Father and this mission of our peer. I mean, we're not His peer, right? He's Jesus, He's Lord, but He calls us brothers and sisters. And now that we're back home, guess whose inheritance we're living off of? His. We wasted ours. It's His inheritance that we're entitled to, and Jesus, the true elder brother, rejoices to share His inheritance, His glory with us. So, it's worth asking the question, what if you took it upon yourself, if we took it upon ourselves to see our younger brothers home? Instead of sort of cowering in our religious corner, putting up the shelter, oh, the world is falling. No, what if we were on the offense like Jesus, going into enemy-controlled territory, rescuing, saving, bringing the lost back home? That is the heart of our Father, and that is the mission of our elder brother of Jesus. That way we wouldn't just be concerned about maintaining the status quo. We'd be concerned about pursuing and rescuing those who are lost. There's one more thing about this mission that Jesus is involved in, that this elder brother is responsible for, and it's important to say. And that is to bring our younger brothers home. It's going to require personal cost. It's going to require cost. It's going to require an investment. It's not just something we can give lip service to. Oh, yeah, I care about that. No. It's going to require intentionality. It's going to require time. It will require financial resources to invest in the mission. The mission of Jesus, who is clear that my goal is to seek and to save what is lost. It's we who are called to go. It's we who are called to give, to serve. And after all, whose inheritance is it that the younger brother lives off of, that we live off? It's off the elder brother. It's going to require personal cost to the elder brothers. But for those who share their father's heart, and for those who share the mission of their elder brother and his priorities, they will pay it. They will pay it to see their younger brothers home. There is a cost. And there's actually one character in this story that has to pay the ultimate cost, okay? One poor character, who dies. Somebody dies in this story. You know who it is? That poor fattened calf. They kill the fattened calf and have a feast. It's kind of sad for the fattened calf, but it's a picture of a deeper principle, okay? Something had to die for us to be reconciled. Someone had to die for us to be brought back home. And the irony is that, of course, veal, which comes from a calf, is the most expensive, it's the most tender, the most valuable meat that you can get. Same way with lamb, versus it's almost kind of sick to imagine killing a baby cow, so it dining off the young of an animal. The most pure, the most innocent would die. But you see, it was the most innocent, the most pure that died so we could come home. So there could be a celebration at your return home. So that we could be reconciled to our Father. And it's that cost that we remember today. So I invite you, as we come forward on this last Sunday, usually we share Holy Communion on the first Sunday of the month, but we're doing a little different today as we wrap up this series. To think about, I invite you to remember the cost that was paid to bring you home. And to consider the cost of investing your life, to making it your life's purpose and mission to match that of our true elder brother, to help see those lost younger brothers and sisters back home. Are you willing to pay it? Are you willing to stand? Are you willing to make it a priority?